Welcome back to the program. Today we're going to talk about the season of Saturn and the Hebrew concept of the Reaper. Did it show COVID coming?
Well, we are definitely going to go there and we're going to talk about it, but we need to
Okay.
lay a foundation before getting there. So let's talk about Saturn. In Hebrew, Saturn's known as, it's called Shabbatai,
Okay.
and it's a play off of like seventh or the seventh planet, right? And the Sabbath is Shabbat. So Shabbat, Shabbatai, they're virtually synonymous in meaning.
Okay.
So it's the Sabbath, it's the destroying angel, and if you look up on the screen, it was represented in its hieroglyphic form by the character Zon, and it was or Zion in modern Hebrew, but it's like a plowshare, like a scythe. It's like something cutting something down. It's when to reap, when to sow.
So it's if you say the destroying angel, the comparison to COVID and the relationship with COVID sounds kind of oddly appropriate. That's
Yes, and that's a good point, because where Saturn is, and you can pull the next slide, is wherever Saturn is, it's reaping what's there. And it was there in the archetypes between Capricorn and Aquarius. And we'll talk about those meanings.
Yeah, it looks like we've got a little bit of a pile up between Capricorn and Aquarius. This is April of 2020 that we're looking at.
And there certainly was a pile up of planets there. And some good, some bad, but like at the start of April 2020, there was a pile up. And the COVID stuff started a little before then, but these have an effect when they get within range of each other. They, if we're looking at seasons, there's some tolerances.
So since this is a mostly a biblical themed show that we're doing on the signs of the times, what Bible stories come to mind when we talk about Saturn?
One of my favorites is Joseph, who got sold into Egypt.
Okay,
so
that's not the one I would have gone with, because what do you mean by that?
Well, he interprets the Pharaoh's dream. He gets reputable with interpreting dreams. And what I'm fascinated with Joseph is he, in his interpretations, were using what we found as ancient sky or language knowledge that the Hebrews would have had. And because of how well he interprets stuff, I do think that the Hebrews did get some of their language from the Egyptians, but it's my speculation and my theory that seems to have some substantial evidence in it in the Bible, but the Hebrew patriarchs seem to have passed down certain knowledge. And there are other documents that say that Jacob taught Joseph well and taught Benjamin, and a lot of them this type of knowledge. And what I'm getting at is Pharaoh has a dream, and he sees 7 ears of corn that are full, and then they're kind of taken away and they become weak and meager. But more particularly, he sees 7 cow that are fat and full, and then there's 7 lean ones. And the interpretation that Joseph uses is one of the ancient symbols that these represent. For example, the cow is a representation of the zodiac Taurus, the cow or the bull. And it is a representation or a symbol of abundance, food, possessions, wealth.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he prophesied.
Yeah, and then he has 7 repeat again, and they become weak and meager. But the idea of 7 is Saturn. It's the Reaper. It's taking it away.
Okay.
So he's interpreting the dream based on these archetypes that we have.
So where's Saturn been lately in the sky? What are we looking at?
Well, at the very start of COVID, it had moved into a range where it was kind of on the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius, where it's going to affect Capricorn archetypes and also Aquarius archetypes. So let's flip to the next screen. So Capricorn, we've talked about before, it was represented by a thorn. And that's what you see on the far left, the depiction of that. And it also has like this 3 degrees of like the underworld, that arrow's pointing down. Think of the opposite idea as a Christmas tree, where it's evergreen and it's pointing to heaven. It's pointing downward, so it's pointing to the underworld.
This doesn't sound pleasant at all.
Well, it's the archetype of Adam and Eve. Like Adam and Eve took a fruit from
like descending,
and because they had taken fruit from not from God, but they had taken it from the devil. He became their father in a way, and the world he became the God of this world, which Paul said. So he became that father figure, and the whole point of Jesus and his purchase of creation was that he was purchasing it back, becoming the father again, the father of this creation, being the one that purchased us back, where he takes ownership from it. He pays the price.
Yeah.
So Capricorn can represent the devil archetype, the thorn archetype. It can represent the father figure. It can represent patriarchal order. It can represent government. It brings in all these archetypes.
Now, when we talk about like the devil and government, now you're speaking my language.
Yeah. Yeah. So most certainly. So when you see Saturn go there and it's taken away, and it's retracting, it's going against that archetype. You had some crazy politics during that time. First off, Donald Trump was in high office of the land, and he was in a sense the father of the nation.
It was the most tremendous president.
But anyways, what happened with Donald, there was a lot of people attacking him, a lot of people trying to cancel him. And that archetype certainly came up with Saturn in Capricorn, because it's this attack on the father figure, or the government figure, or that type of archetype. And also when COVID hit, if you remember, there was attraction against government. Like government didn't get, they put out a mandate of like rules and stuff. And what you have Jupiter in there, and there's the expansion of government in that. And we can talk about that a little bit later in another podcast when we go into Jupiter a little more. But Jupiter it's the opposite of Saturn for one. And it was expanding government. But there was ways government was getting diminished.
Yeah, I can certainly see the expansion of government during that period, because I had like, all of the extra rules. You have to wear a mask here. You have to, these businesses are closed. These businesses are mostly closed. All of that kind of stuff. Is that kind of what you're going for?
Yes, and there was certainly a mixed bag. But if you look at the planets and where they're aligning, how they're all huddled together, it gave us a mixed bag. But what was it called when you were allowed to work?
Essential employees?
Essential workers, right?
Yeah.
So essential workers could work. And people were all scared, and they were doing all the shutdowns around that time of the alignment.
Yeah.
And what you would see happen is even the police force in the area that we lived in were shutting down. They weren't patrolling.
And don't I know it?
And I talked to like one of the sheriffs across the street, and he's like, "No, we're told not to approach people." And I'm like, "You guys aren't patrolling?" And it's like, I got to work a little quicker. But I shouldn't be admitting that on the air.
I'm pretty sure we're past the statute of limitations for traffic violations.
I hope so. But anyways, there was a retraction there, but since Jupiter was there, there was an expansion there too. So we saw both. But more particularly, it was moving into Aquarius, and I'll flip to that slide and talk about this archetype. So Aquarius is represented by Main in the Hebrew language, and it's a representation of water. And it looks very similar to what like people have for the zodiac archetypes characters. They're still very similar if you look on the screen. And it even looks similar to what you like would look up in the sky if you look at the actual what the constellation looks like. They're all very, very similar. And what's crazy is how much the biblical definition matches the astrological definition of that constellation.
What do you mean by that?
John talks about the whore sitting on the waters, and there he's referencing the Hebrew hieroglyph, the waters, or the earliest form of Hebrew. It even matches has some similarities to the recent form of Hebrew, but he ends up saying that the whore which set us on the waters, and the waters is a representation of it says all people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So that's social constructs. Aquarius in astrology rolls over social constructs. They have a matching definition. So
So we have Saturn moving into Aquarius that's retracting and taking away our social constructs
our
and
social gatherings, our social constructs.
yeah, no going to church.
Yeah, that type of stuff. So absolutely, it was showing exactly what happened in COVID in the sky, and we followed that season.
So that begs the question, where's Saturn today?
So, but we're going into Pisces.
Yeah. So what does that mean when Saturn goes into Pisces? What's getting because this is like right now.
Yeah. Well, Pisces is the hardest one to like nail down because people and their archetypes are like assign everything to Pisces, the everything left over. But ultimately, if you look at the symbolism of it and you look like where it is positioned, it's next to Aries, and you have Aries the lamb, and what you have is with Pisces is you have one fish ascending to heaven and the other one recirculating the earth. So it's next to the ascent. The idea of Pisces is to ascend and
Okay.
and go to heaven, go to the other world. So the idea of heaven brings in other archetypes. It brings in the idea of a different world, the subconscious, like celebrities, fantasies, and like things from another world.
So like games, movies.
Yeah, even aliens.
Okay.
There's your curveball.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to go to that subject on this one.
So I don't have an opinion on aliens, but right as we started to move in within the cusp energy of that, people started putting forth like videos and claims of alien saucer ships, and they're describing alien saucer ships, not necessarily always saying that, but they start matching this narrative that's in the sky of them getting taken down and shot down and crashing.
Yeah, that has been in the last few weeks that I've seen more of that.
Yeah, so that's certainly like a theme of that. What are some other things that have happened?
Let's see, the last few weeks we've had some bank failures. We have had like the repeal of some of these COVID things, like our local hospital system said no more masks, which was surprising to some people, but it was almost right on schedule as Saturn leaves Aquarius and into Pisces.
I want to go back to the bank thing.
Yeah.
Because and very in particularly the Silicon Valley bank thing.
Okay.
So with the banking system, Pisces is the archetype of the other world, right? The internet world, Silicon Valley.
Oh, the
world.
pretend world of the internet. Okay.
The pretend. So Pisces is a representation of that. And even when you go back to the original hieroglyph of that, it was some people see it as like the fish, like we've described, and the early Christians. We're going to go into that a little more too. We're going to go into that archetype, but some represented it as a shepherd's staff, and where it is a representation of fantasies. The idea of holding the shepherd's staff shows like self-will, control, nurture, like caring for a flock, and brings in the idea of self-control or manhood. So has similar archetypes and themes. The idea of being able to control your fantasy. So
you're saying our money's not real?
If we're looking at this as a season and what we're going into, we really should consider those things may not be as safe in this season. Like the other things that are of the other world, certain things on the internet may not always stay away. They may be attacked and put back a little bit. They may receive rules. For example, in politics, they're talking about banning TikTok. It's something of that other world, and they're timing it, at least what they're intending to do, with the season of that stuff getting taken away.
Interesting.
So one other thing that Saturn will retract from, and what I've seen in my personal circles, is where there's like false narratives or like false stories that have been being told. There's a lot of strong effort and research to go to discredit a lot of that stuff. That is also something that this season's about, is about like cutting out the lies that have been being told and the working towards finding out what is true, what is real, what is reality. within this reality.
Waking up from the dream world and facing the reality.
So, but you can see efforts both ways. This archetype brings in that struggle of stopping people from voicing the truth, but also the archetype of like trying to eliminate the lies that have been being told, clearing the history, that type of things. So between that, think about things of the other world, things that aren't a part of this world. Those are the target. And another thing that could be is with a recession kind of in place and kind of happening, it may be that people retract a little bit, take a day of rest from as much entertainment too. That is certainly an archetype that could be coming up in the next a few years here.
Yeah. Take a rest from entertainment and illusions and spend more time focusing on the real world.
Before Sabbath day.
Well, that would be very fitting for Saturn. All right, I think that's a wrap.
Yep.